freeing up that cash so that when you do in fact retire, you're feeling that freedom. For somebody who's younger and wants to have a good retirement financially, is I use the two words, it's called deferred gratification.
Make a plan, but you don't need to do it tomorrow.
Really try to focus on what is my strategy to rid myself of this debt? What do I need to do in terms of prioritizing?
How does it work money-wise? Because they might think, I can't afford a financial planner. I don't want to spend money on that. How does it work?
Our focus is when we're building out, detailed financial plans is if we can get people in a situation when they're retired and they're completely debt-free, it is very freeing for them.
Yeah.
And then they can just focus on what's important to them. Welcome back to another edition of Retire and Thrive podcast, where we help you live your life with purpose, wealth, and confidence.
And today we are breaking the chains. I'm Kamie Raisler, and this is Dan. He's our expert here. I'm just here to ask all the questions that many people have as they head to that retirement phase, or it could be any age, really. It's always good to manage your money in an appropriate fashion. And today we're focusing on debt. We have 3 ways to escape the debt trap before retirement. It can be a stressful time, Dan.
It can be very stressful. In fact, this goes back to lesson 3.
Which we've covered a few times.
Which we've talked about, which is you only have freedom when your cash flows freely. I know It's a little bit of a tongue twister, but we started out with that, and then we're kind of diving in a little bit heavier today with the whole debt structure.
Right. And when you think about debt, you think maybe there isn't much freedom there because I'm paying that car loan. I have that mortgage. How can we really feel free? We're going to get into that a little bit today with our 3 points.
Right. And I think as a society, we tend to, think debt's okay. And I think certain types of debt, which again, we'll talk a little bit more about that, Kamie.
Mm-hmm.
But as you approach retirement, I think the whole mindset has to shift a little bit because, as you recall, when we talked about in the previous lessons, when it comes to retirement, it's really about cash flow.
Yes.
And so we're kind of shifting away from that accumulation phase to more the distribution phase. So I'm actually anxious today to kind of get into this.
Yes. And we have these 3 points. But first, Dan, I want to touch on the emotional side of things. You deal with clients all the time that are heading into retirement, and it can be stressful, as we mentioned. What are some of the key stressors that really impact folks emotionally?
Yeah, I would say that one of the main key factors that affect people is just psychologically as they approach retirement, what is going to be on their bucket list. And again, I think that might be in episode 12 or 13 when we touch on that. And so, building out a financial plan, we can put together all the numbers, but a lot of people have kind of their identity tied in with their work, and they've been maybe at the same employer for 20, 30 years. And so it's not just the financial side that people struggle with, but I think also it's just, what does that next chapter look like for me?
All right, let's get into it. As I mentioned, 3 ways to escape the debt trap before retirement. We'll start with number 1, and that is inventory everything. Everything, Dan?
I don't know about everything.
Okay, good.
We won't count receipts when you go to the grocery store, Kamie, but yeah. I think taking inventory of everything is, at least on an annual basis, take a look at where you're spending your money.
Mm-hmm.
And, debt has continued to mushroom not only in consumers and businesses, but obviously our government. And that's not today's purpose is to talk about debt in the government level. But as you approach retirement, I think it's good to get a handle. I mean, as a society, we're so accustomed to how much can I afford on a monthly basis. And that's focused more on just what's my monthly payment as opposed to what's the total debt.
Mm-hmm.
And again, when you start approaching retirement, maybe it's 2, 3, 4 years before retirement, the goal ultimately is we get into retirement and we have as least amount of debt as possible. But taking inventory simply means let's kind of peel back the onion, so to speak, and let's see what we really do owe. And it may be everything from a car loan. And, I think the first thing that I always encourage people to do is take a look at the actual interest rate itself. And obviously, as we talked about before too, in 2022, rates just started to move substantially higher.
Mm-hmm.
So for a lot of people, when it was time to get a new car in 2023, 24, they might be paying 7-8% on these car loans. Could be an RV maybe that was part of their dream. Could be a boat. But same thing. A lot of people have stayed in the same place with their homes just because of the high rates on mortgages. But taking inventory just says, go through, look at all your statements, take a good look at what you're paying, not only just the monthly payment, but what's the actual balance and also what's the interest rate.
So when they're looking at that number and they see it, okay, Dan, I see what I'm spending. I see my debt. What's the next step?
I think the next step is really try to focus on what is my strategy to rid myself of this debt? What do I need to do in terms of prioritizing? Is it that car loan? Is it the RV loan? It could be something as frivolous as, we bought this furniture and we bought it on a 180 day, and all of a sudden maybe the 180 day comes and we didn't have the funds to pay for it, and it's kind of slipped, and it might be a higher interest rate than you're aware of. So I think the next step is just to take a close look and say, what's my plan here to reduce that debt so that when I do retire or I'm close to retirement, that debt is actually either gone or certainly it's reduced.
In your experience, Dan, would you say that retirees sometimes underestimate the impacts of debt? And if so, why do we think that is?
Absolutely. I think when we're retired, and I just mentioned a little bit ago, is that it's a cash flow game. It's not an asset game. So it's not about how much you can accumulate. I mean, more people focus on the dollar amount, but what they're really missing is that when we start looking at the income sources, be it pensions or Social Security, or it could be from your investments, it could be rental properties, whatever it might be. But if you're getting Social Security and a pension, and you've got a car loan that's $600 a month, for example, that $600 has to come from somewhere. So think of it this way, Kamie, is if I'm getting $2,000 a month from Social Security, but I got a $600 a month car payment, technically my net Social Security check is $1,400.
All stuff you need to look at. Let's move on to our next way to escape the debt trap, and that is prioritize, which really comes into play with our first, inventory everything, and then prioritize, as you mentioned, prioritize what's important and what should maybe get paid off first. How do you prioritize?
Yeah, I think the easiest way, and I know there's different theories out there of how do you prioritize your debt. I think first, as you alluded to, take inventory of everything. Write it all down, just a basic, you don't necessarily need a fancy Excel spreadsheet, but just put the debt down, put the current balance, put the interest rate and the payment. Just those 4 columns can at least get you started. And then sometimes just taking a step back, if you've got 5 different things that you owe money on, take a look at it. If you have a credit card that's maybe got $3,500 of debt on it, and you're paying 14%, and you've been paying the minimum of $200 a month, and that's a high interest rate, it might make more sense to, instead of prepaying your mortgage or prepaying your car payment, take that excess and pay down so that maybe in a few months that credit card is paid for. And what that basically does is that frees up cash flow for you. And if you're paying $200 a month on your credit card bill, and you've got a car loan that maybe you owe $10,000 to, once that credit card is paid for, take that excess $200 and then apply that to the car loan. So it's kind of like you're just kind of chiseling away at this debt over a period of time. And I think, the key phrase there is over time. I mean, I think sometimes people get overwhelmed and they're just like, I don't even know where to begin. And at the end of the day, I think if you take the inventory and then you start prioritizing and say, let's set a goal here. And if I pay this amount of money on this credit card, then in 3 months, 6 months, that's paid for. I'm going to take the extra $200 a month. I'm going to apply that to my car loan, and it just continues. But I think at the end of the day, it's all about freeing up that cash so that when you do, in fact, retire, you're feeling that freedom.
And when you're already in retirement, from your experience with your clients, what is the most emotionally draining part of that? Often when they look at, their inventory, do you see a common theme, or is it different for everyone?
Yeah, I think it's different for everyone. That, we have clients of ours that have very high net worth, but they don't really have a lot of either liquidity, meaning money available in the short run, or they don't have a consistent income stream. And so for them, they feel like cash is tight, but yet their assets continue to grow. And so sometimes that's more of just a psychological thing. But one of the things, if you've worked for a company for an extended period of time, we're used to just getting a paycheck every single pay period. And when you retire, that's gone. And so it's like, how do I replace that paycheck that comes in? And back to the debt scenario, if you've got mortgages and car payments and credit card bills, that's all money that's being sucked out of what you would normally use like a typical paycheck. So if you've got pensions and Social Security once you're retired and you've got these monthly obligations, that basically just reduces the amount that you're getting from your pension and or your Social Security. And I think for some people, it's just liberating. It's almost freeing when they free up that amount.
Yeah.
And going back to the original, like you said, lesson number 1, that inventory, we found oftentimes when people put their inventory down, they don't necessarily realize how much debt they actually have, or worse, they don't realize that, oh my gosh, between everything, I'm paying $2,100 a month or whatever it might be.
Right. And you might not know where your money is going. I mean, for me, simply just looking at your credit card, when you log into your credit card account, you can see it'll categorize everything for you. And you're like, oh my gosh, why am I spending so much on food? Or why am I spending so much on golf? It's like, all right, let's even this out somehow. So yeah, there's different ways to look at it at all age levels, that's for sure. All right, let's get into our third and final way. And this is basically just finding a plan. So Dan, it's create a 12 to 24 month elimination plan, basically to make a plan, but you don't need to do it tomorrow.
And I think that's, again, a little bit of the mental hurdle is that you're right, it doesn't have to be done tomorrow. But I think it's putting together a strategic plan of when can I have my debt reduced and I can free up some of this cash flow, which ties into this lesson that we're talking about, is that you only have freedom when your cash flows freely. And so if you put together a plan, and obviously if you're 55 years old and you just bought a house and you've got a $300,000 mortgage, you're not going to obviously have that paid off in 12 to 24 months. But everything else, and I know we had talked about this before, I'm not a very big fan of having debt on assets that go down in value. In other words, depreciating assets. Now, I know that's not necessarily probably a popular thing for me to say on this podcast, but at the end of the day, if you're buying an asset that's worth this and it continues to go down and you're owing money on that, when it's all said and done, whether, again, it's a boat or a car or an RV, you're left with an asset that's worth substantially less than what you paid for it. And for some people, they still owe money on it. It becomes very challenging and somewhat detrimental for them. But on the other hand, if you've got a mortgage that's at, 3%, 3.5%, or 4%, and you've got a portfolio that's got money in it and it's continuing to grow and grow and grow, obviously it may make sense to keep the mortgage because it's really a rate issue if you're at a lower rate. Now, one of the things I just kind of comment, not to go too off on you here, but a lot has changed in the tax law that doesn't allow people to deduct the interest on some of their loans, whether it's a student loan or it could be a mortgage. Most people in today, based on the current tax reform that was done in 2016, don't allow for deductions of mortgages. And so, the old phrase that, well, it helps me for taxes. At the end of the day, if you're taking a standard deduction, it doesn't help you for taxes.
Right. Is there good debt? When you mentioned the mortgage, when you look at that, and then you look at the car payment, obviously you mentioned depreciation, maybe not the best debt. Is there good debt in your mind?
Yeah, I think to simplify it, I would say good debt is debt that is on an asset that goes up in value.
Okay, so my house.
So your house would be one. If you wanted to start a business that you needed to borrow some money, that, again, the goal would be is that the business valuation goes up. Or maybe it's you've got some other investments, not necessarily the stock market, because the way you borrow money in the stock market, again, not part of this podcast here, is something called a margin account. But usually those rates are very, very high.
Sure.
And we're not necessarily fans of encouraging people to borrow money against the stock market. But in general, your house is your typical individual. Yeah, borrowing money against your house, I think, can be very appropriate. I do feel like if you are retired, that can be, Kamie, somewhat of a burden if you're strapped with the mortgage payment. And the other thing I just want to clarify here too is this is all about cash flow. It's not about assets and liabilities. But, house, even if it's paid for, a lot of people put that in the category that it's an asset. But I always remind people, I look at assets as things that generate income. And, whether that's a portfolio or bonds or whatever it might be, a business, real estate. But your home, while it may be paid for, which is a big, big goal, and we highly encourage people to do it when they approach retirement, there still is maintenance, there still is utilities, there still is property tax, there's still all of that expense that goes with the house. Now, the alternative is you sell the house and you move somewhere else and you rent. But at the end of the day, your housing is going to be an expense, just like your car is an expense. Even if your car is paid for and your houses are paid for, there still is ongoing maintenance and ongoing expense to maintain those. Our focus is, when we're building out, detailed financial plans, is if we can get people in a situation when they're retired and they're completely debt-free, it is very freeing for them.
Yeah.
And then they can just focus on what's important to them.
So do you find that freedom only comes if you don't have debt? I mean, I'm sure it doesn't, but really to be truly free, you have to eliminate that debt?
I don't think so. I think, we've got clients of ours that, we've got quite a wide array of clients, but I'm just thinking of one in particular. They're now in their early 70s. They've got a home here in Minnesota. They've got a home down in Florida, in a golf community. And both worked at a local employer. So they're both getting pensions from the same employer. They're both getting Social Security. And so combined, they have north of $100,000 worth of income in their 70s. And that's before even touching investments.
Yeah.
And so they still owe, I think it's $300 and some thousand on their place in Florida, but their mortgage payment's like $1,200 and they're at 3.5%. So very comfortable with someone in that situation because it's a relatively small, you're talking about $15,000 a year for a mortgage relative to their total income that's somewhere north of $100,000. And that leaves the remaining amount for them to live whatever lifestyle it is that they want, whether it's for travel or groceries or whether it's for utilities and property taxes and all of that. But again, from that standpoint. But then on the flip side, we've got people that, owe a lot of money on their house and they're 65 years old and they owe a lot and they don't have pensions and all they've got really is Social Security and a portfolio.
Right.
And those we find are the people that tend to be a little bit more concerned about what's going on in the markets because that is their livelihood.
Yeah.
And based on how well that portfolio does, that's what basically, it's not keeps them in the float, but it does concern them if their accounts are down 7-8% because all they've got is Social Security and their assets.
Yeah. And maybe folks like that, this podcast is for everyone, but folks like that can really benefit from a podcast like this. Do you have any other client stories of someone that maybe turned their life really around? They had a lot of debt and they were able to successfully become more free?
Yeah. And usually we have that discussion when people are in their 40s or 50s. I think, again, I can think of one in particular. We met with this couple and it was probably 10 years ago and they were in their late 40s at the time. And that's exactly right. They owed on their house. They went out and bought a pontoon, which was $700 a month for their pontoon. And they did lots of traveling. They went to Belize and they traveled to Mexico. They had a very, very high income, but they just continued to accumulate debt. And I feel like a lot of it was tied to the tangible feeling of having all of this stuff. And, we built out a plan and just kind of showed them based on the path that you're on, we're looking at retiring in your mid to late 60s. And I remember he was shocked. He's just like, well, with our income, how can that be? And I'm like, well, you have a high income, but if you retire, that income's gone. Where's your income going to come from?
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a choice. And this is more of the younger generation to have this comment. But I believe that the key to success for somebody who's younger and wants to have a good retirement financially is I use the two words, it's called deferred gratification. And so for those of you in your 30s and 40s, oftentimes it's easy to get caught up in, my car's 3 years old, I need to get a new car. Or my neighbor just bought a camper and now they're going to the lake and they've got a place down there and they spend every weekend there. So we're going to do the same. And again, it's easy to do, but what we encourage people to do is when it comes to things like that, again, going back to the depreciating assets, don't buy a new camper. Don't spend $35,000 in a new camper. See what you can find used. Maybe it's just a little one for $10,000, but save up and maybe then you can get something that's $20,000 in a few years. Or maybe this year we don't do the camping thing and we park that on hold, but we, build up a cash reserve or whatever it might be. But when it comes to retirement, you can choose to either enjoy it all now, or you can defer some of that enjoyment, as I alluded to, for something else, whether it's retirement or whatever it might be. But yes, we've seen lots of scenarios where people have been somewhat burdened by debt and then ultimately just through a plan. And I think it's just consistency over time. And like I said, this couple that was in their 40s and now in their late 50s, their house is completely paid for.
They turned it around.
Yeah, they have no debt. And their whole retirement looks completely different. And if you would have asked me 10 years ago, based on the path they were on, what their retirement would have looked like, they literally now are looking at a place in Florida to buy. And 10 years ago, that wasn't even an option for them.
Yeah. So some deferred gratification there, that's for sure. Perhaps they use the steps, inventory everything, prioritize, and create that 12 to 24 month plan. Those were the 3 ways to escape debt a debt trap before retirement. Dan, I have one final question for you. Really has not totally much to do with what we were talking about, but you mentioned obviously financial planners and folks that can help you with your retirement and where you should pull your money from to help eliminate some of this debt. How does that work? For someone that's never had a financial planner, they're maybe in their 40s. That's kind of what drew me to this question. So you're like, well, they were in their 40s. Maybe there's people out there who are in their 40s that, well, I don't need a financial planner yet, but perhaps they do. So if they are 40 years old, they're looking ahead to retirement. They're like, I'm going to get ahead of the game here and work with a financial planner. How does that work? How does it work money-wise? Because they might think, I can't afford a financial planner. I don't want to spend money on that. How does it work?
That's a very, very broad question. It's a fair question, but it's very broad. I mean, it can work any number of ways. I think when you're in your 40s, the main thing and the main focus is it's really about the type or the tax status of your investments. And so for me, I'm very strong on Roth IRAs.
Mm-hmm.
I know today's about cash flow, but I'm going to answer your question. So if I'm in my 30s and 40s, my biggest concern isn't necessarily how much money do I need in retirement, because we have clients of ours today that did a really, really good job at saving, but 90% of their money has never been taxed. And so the big challenge for them is going to be, what taxes am I going to pay to get that out of that retirement account?
Sure.
So back to the financial planner, I think what a financial planner can do for somebody in their 30s and 40s isn't necessarily just, I don't have enough money to hire a financial planner, but a financial planner can take someone in that accumulation phase, maybe that younger generation, and can maybe run some scenarios to say, Kamie, if you put 5% of your income into the pre-tax in your 401k and you put another 6% into the Roth component of your 401k, they can project out what that looks like when you're 60 years old or you're 65 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's probably one of the biggest things that employees or the younger generation misses, is it's been drilled into their head for years and years and years, whether it's through their parents or grandparents, save, 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 save. And it's all about saving taxes today, but there's no talk about saving taxes in the future.
Yeah.
And that's really all that the Roth is do you want to pay taxes now or do you want to pay taxes down the road? And so when should they hire a financial advisor? I mean, if I'm in my 30s and 40s and I didn't know what I know, I would just knock on doors and I would just talk and make a few phone calls. Obviously, you can go online and you can look at reviews and you can see what their reputation is. But I would knock on a few doors and I would just sit down. And, most places would allow you to come and visit for an hour.
Yeah.
And, I always kind of joke a little bit. I mean, if you're meeting with a financial advisor, sometimes you have to disclose a lot of things that maybe it's a little uncomfortable. It's kind of like going to a doctor, right?
Right.
But meeting with a financial advisor, financial planner, and you visit one or two or three different places, I think you'll get a pretty good feel about, do they have what I need? But the majority of people that are younger, I think, need more direction on where should I be putting my money? And for the most part, maximizing your retirement contributions at an early age through your company sponsor plan, even up and above what the match is. And I know we're getting close to time here, but I do want to mention just three things that I think are very critical for people that are in their 30s and 40s.
Sure.
Because it just popped in my head sometimes. These things are
that
random.
Works.
So
that's fine.
But this whole podcast is Retire and Thrive. It's focused about retirement. And then, as we talked about, enjoying the fruits of your labor, which was lesson 1, and that's the thrive part. But for the people in their 30s and 40s, I think there's 3 financial hurdles that everybody faces, potentially everybody faces. And we focus all the time on retirement. And that's 95% of what we do is helping people retire and do the things that they want to do in retirement. So I don't care if you're 30s or if you're 50s. I mean, that's really a big part of what we do and a lot what financial advisors do. The second thing, and again, these are what I call the 3 financial hurdles during that accumulation phase. Retirement is one of those 3. The second thing is your home. And I know that's what we were talking about here, the debt thing, but just imagine a world where you're making payments of $1,600 a month and you get to be 60 years old and you retire and that $1,600 is gone. Now all you have is, like I said, the utilities, maintenance, and taxes. So the second financial hurdle is getting your house paid for by retirement, if you can pull that off. And then third, if it's important to you, and this is very subjective to different opinions, but if you've got kids and you want to help them with college funding.
Yeah.
And so kind of in a simple way, I always tell people, if you take care of the retirement get your home situated, and if you have kids and college is important to you, you take care of those 3 things, the rest will just fall into place.
Yeah. And all of that really needs a plan.
Yeah.
And looking ahead, so flat rate for a financial planner, or do they make money when you make money, or is it different for everyone?
It's different for everyone. There's financial planners that make money if you purchase something, more of a commission base. There's some that charge a flat fee. And then there's some that charge based on the assets that they managed.
Okay.
And so I'm thank you for bringing that up, because I think that's an important question. I mean, that would be one of the questions that I didn't think of till you brought it up. But yeah, if I'm sitting with a financial planner, I would say, how do you get paid?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for clarifying that. We appreciate it. All right. Next week, this was episode 11. We're so excited to move along to episode 12. And we are going to focus on what do you do once the debt is gone? Now, where do we go? And I'm excited for that.
Yeah, it'll be great.
Yes. Thanks so much for joining us again. You can subscribe to our channel. We have updates weekly, and we really appreciate you joining us along on this journey, because we are so excited to help you manage your money in retirement.